I wanted to do something slightly differently here. We're going to go through and develop a part of my game here, and just kind of take you along with me as I go through one step at a time and create this part of the game. Each one of my dungeons is going to have a little bit of side content that is needed to progress through the dungeon that is going to be an entirely different genre of game. So that allows me a little bit of creative freedom, tinkering with other stuff aside from just doing the action RPG thing constantly. And today I want to get started on the first of those. And I think what I want to make is a twin stick shooter. So we're going to go through and set up a handful of IDs, make a bit of a to-do list, and then get started on at least making the character. So here we have my to-do board that I use to track all the tasks in the game. As you can see, there's still a lot of stuff that I need to do, but let's make this here twin stick shooter. And we're going to be adding a couple of subtasks. So first and foremost, we want the character. We want to make a handful of different enemies. We're going to want to make a little boss fight. And that's for now all there is to it. For the character, I need to make a player character actually. And I also need to make a base character because everything is going to essentially, I think, work the same way. Just enemies are going to be AI based and player characters of course will be input based, but all the code below that should be effectively the same, I think. And since there's going to be a twin stick shooter, there's going to be a lot of bullets that are going to get spawned here, so I think setting up the object pooling for this also probably a good idea. And there isn't really that much more to it. So let's get started, I guess, with making this should be two different tasks, actually, base character and object pooling. Object pooling can be the very last thing we do, that's fine. So a lot of this is going to be C++ coding, because that is what I do majority of my work in, obviously, so that's what we're going to be doing here. I have to decide whether or not I want this to be a pawn, or I want this to be a character. And in this case, I'm kind of imagining this to be like a little drone that's firing these bullets, because that'll make it easy to turn around and shoot in just the forward direction. Not necessarily a very humanoid-ish character. So there's not really a lot of use in doing the whole character class thing, because what can a character do that a pawn cannot? Well, the character has the jump function, for instance, specific to the character, because that's using the character movement component in some ways. But we're not going to need to jump for this. Same thing, a lot of things here to do with the character movement we don't actually care about. This is really good for bipedal movement for humanoid characters, but that's not what we're making here. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make a simple pawn class that's going to have its own pawn movement components instead, I think. So let's go in here and make that. So let's add a Unreal class. Class name will be twin stick character. It's called twin stick pawn, just to not get confused. And that will be a pawn type class. It's adding my files to my Git, which I probably should make a commit before doing all this, but hey, there we go. We have the class now. So let's start setting up the components. It already has the setup player input component. I don't think we're actually necessarily going to want that on here. So let's just remove that for now, because this is going to be purely the base class, which will need will it be a skeletal mesh? Will we make this a static mesh or a skeletal mesh? I think we're going to make this a skeletal mesh. So let's do U property, edit default only, blueprint read only is probably fine. Let's do read write. No, let's do read only. I don't think we're going to need to set this on runtime or anything. So just having the edits default only can let me edit them in the child classes, and that's all I need, I think. So class U skeletal mesh components, which will be mesh, and then another U property again, which will give the same things here. I suppose we do want a camera. That is a fantastic point. Do we want to have that on a camera boom? Probably we do, right? Yeah, let's make a spring arm component as well. Well, no, we don't want that actually, because we only want that on the player. I'm smart sometimes. We want the pawn movement component. I think there's also a floating pawn movement component, right? Yeah, floating pawn movement. I guess that just doesn't apply gravity, and the default pawn movement component might. Anyway, let's initialize those in the constructor then. So we set our mesh to be create default subobject, blah, 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 blah. Then we attach that mesh to the root component. That makes sense. Do we even have a root component? I guess the mesh could be. No, the mesh definitely cannot be the root component in this case. Does the pawn have a default root component? I guess we're about to find out. I don't think it does. Anyway, movement will be making a floating pawn movement, for which we will probably need to include this. Yeah, let's real quick build this just to see if the mesh ends up being the root component, because I don't want that to be the case. The reason that I don't want that to be the case is we're going to have like this character, right? Represented by a square. But then within that character, I want the mesh to be able to rotate around without affecting the character's rotation itself. And the reason that I want to do that, at least for the player character, is because that way we can have a camera on this which won't rotate with it. I can also just set the camera rotation to be in world rotation, and then I can just rotate the character as a whole. That might be better to do. I think that might be the better way to go. Yeah, so in that case, the skeleton can just be the root component. Anyway, this is yelling at me for some reason. Oh yeah, this function isn't declared because I removed that. That makes sense. So let's first and foremost find where the crap I have these things stored, somewhere around here, and make a twin stick pawn just to see what that's like in Blueprint real quick. Where did it go in my other monitor? So we have new Blueprint, then we have the mesh, and the mesh does seem to be the root component. So I cannot individually like transform the mesh. So I think that's fine though. If I double click, you go from selecting the component to selecting the actor, and you can see that the transform stays the same. But again, I think that's kind of fine, because when we add a camera, we can just make it use world rotation so that it won't actually rotate with its parents. And why do you not delete yourself? There we go. Okay, so that's the basic setup for this thing. For now, of course, we're going to move on and make the other two classes real quick, and then we'll come back to this and start adding things like the shooting function, which at first we're just going to be spawning in a bullet, but eventually we'll use like some object pooling for that, I imagine, because otherwise the garbage collector is going to hate me. So Unreal class, twin stick player will be a twin stick pawn. This one, however, will be getting the setup player input component, so that's fantastic. And then we add one more class, and that will be twin stick enemy, which also will be a twin stick pawn, which will not actually be needing the setup player components. So let's remove that. The player, however, is going to need some more stuff. So let's make that more stuff. U property, add a default only, blueprint read only, and we'll add a spring arm component for spring arm. And then U property, add a default only, blueprint read only, camera, which obviously then goes into the constructor here. Same old, same old. We start with spring arm, create that. We attach that to the root component. I don't think we need to give this a default rotation necessarily, but if we did, it would be 0 minus 90 something something. We'll just set this up. We only need to set this up once in the player class anyway, so it doesn't actually matter that much. Let's instead do the camera. Default subobject, and then attach it to the spring arm. Now both of these need to be included, because otherwise this class has no idea what the hell's going on. And then we should set up our inputs, for which I'm going to look at my existing character class and just kind of steal some code from there. Because, yeah, you do that in here. You have your enhanced input component, and there you like bind all these actions to specific functions. It's been a while since I set that up. So essentially what we're going to do is going back into the twin stick player. I'll make a section here, and this can be private. Protected. Let's make it protected. Input actions. I mean, that's some suggestion, but that's not what I wanted. So class input action, that would be a U input action, I assume. There we go. This would be move. We have one for look, and then we don't need to for declare that again, actually. And one for shoot or fire. That's fine as well. I think that's the only three that we need, right? What else can you do in a twin stick shooter, realistically? You might have like an ultimate attack or something like that, but largely it's just you move one place with one stick, the other stick is your direction, and then you have one button for like shooting, effectively. I don't think there's much more to it, to be honest with you. So let's keep it at that. There's going to need to be U properties though, with added defaults only. I guess it can't hurt to make them blueprint read-only. I also don't really see a reason to make them blueprint readable at all, to be honest with you. But they need to be set in the defaults. So we have those now. Let's go into our setup input components. There we do an if. I'm just going to steal a line of code here. Enhanced input components is all this. I'm not going to need an include in a moment, but we'll get to it. Then what do? We just do enhanced input component bind action, right? Yeah. So we just take this variable that we just created, bind action, move. I guess we do this on trigger because we need to do this constantly, and we need to make these functions in a moment. I'll just call it move player. Again, we'll come back to this and actually make these functions. Look will also do that, and then fire will, I guess, also run on trigger, right? Because we can just add in like a delay between each trigger. That's a thing that you can do with enhanced input. I wonder if I can set that dynamically. I might be able to, because that way I could easily like set the rate of fire and give like fire rate increases. That would be kind of neat. Anyway, let's just do this, and this is going to conflict because we already have something called fire. So let's call this fire bullet. And then can I just make, yes I can. I think in order to bind them, they necessarily do need to be U functions. That's entirely like the wrong thing though. But we'll get back into that in a moment. Oh, hold on, create member, F input action value. That's the one we need. Because it does give you this as a value to work with, just in case you need it for anything. For fire bullet, we're not going to. For look and moving, we actually, I think, will need that. So let's create a definition for all those. Just going back and forth here, creating the definitions. Can you do that at multiple at a time? You probably can, right? So this might not work because they're not U functions. I know that for delegates, they need to be U functions. I don't know if these need to be U functions. I guess we can just try to build, and we'll see what happens. Make sure everything here is saved. Is it going to yell at me? It doesn't seem to be yelling at me, so those don't need to be U functions, apparently. That's good. So let's, while that starts up again, waiting for us to rebuild in a moment anyway. There we go. Let's start by doing the player movement, because this is actually fairly easy. We first need to get vector 2D. There we go. You do f vector 2D, and you just do your value dot get, and then you in the template tell you what type you're like casting it to. So we do that. It's called input action value here, so need to change that around. So now we have a vector 2D. Movement direction will be our. We don't need that to be a vector, I don't think. We can just add movement input. Oh, that probably takes a 3D vector, right? That does. Yeah, so that's why it said that we needed that. Well, sure. Let's just make that then. Movement direction. I guess technically you would want to normalize this, maybe. And then scale value will set to, I guess, just 1 for now. Scale value would be like the character's speed, right? Does the floating point movement component have its own speed value that it can use? These are the kind of things I don't use these more basic pawns that often. So I need to like kind of mess around with. Yeah, so it's got its max speed and its acceleration and deceleration. So assumedly, this acceleration deals with that. So that should just kind of be it. Why does it cannot convert the type bool into... What do you mean? Oh, what? Why the hell does that return a bool? Well, we don't really need to normalize it anyway. Let's just keep it at what it is. And then, okay, this is a little bit more complicated, I think. Slightly. we need to take this vector 2D and turn it into a yaw rotation. So we take in the X and the Y, which in total is like a direction in a circle, because that's what an analog stick is. But we get that as an X and a Y value. Well, we feel like that might not be what we need to do. No, that's actually exactly what we need to do, isn't it? No. So this is one of those things where I'm like, yeah, AI is nice, but this is exactly not what we need to do. Because this is going to be setting our rotation on the X and the Y, and not on the Z. And the only thing that we need is to rotate around the Z. So you can't just rely on AI doing everything for you. So we need to do a little bit of our own math. Again, Copilot, appreciate it. That's not going to do what I wanted to do. So what I wanted to do is I want to take effectively in this circle, I am inputting this, but what it's giving me is the X and the Y values of that. And you can probably already kind of see where this is going, right? Because at this point, that's just kind of like trigonometry. So if we make a float here for the, this is exactly right. For the look angle, we do 8 and 2 for the X and the Y, or the Y and the X rather. And that will get us the angle in a float value. And then we can just make that as a rotator. So we have the look rotation, F rotator, 0, then we get the yaw, and then the roll is also 0. And then we just set that rotation to that. So this should effectively now allow us to move and look around with the player already. So let's make a quick blueprint here for that. The twin stick player, we'll call twin stick player blueprint or something like that. We see that we have a bunch more components than we did before. And let's, again, for now, just kind of like use this skeletal mesh for this guy. We have the spring arm components, which is going to need to be a fair bit longer. Let's set it to like 700 or something like that. And then this spring arm also needs to be rotated. It doesn't seem to have proper rotation controls, which is a little messed up because it's not set up properly. Okay, I made a mistake there. That's my bad. Going back to our twin stick player here. Well, actually, no, to the twin stick pawn. Because here in the constructor, we're trying to set up attachment to the root component for the mesh. But actually, what we want to do is set root components. Because we hadn't declared a root component yet, I don't think. Because the twin stick player does try to attach the camera thing to the root component. There we go. But since there wasn't a root component yet, it just kind of like threw it in there. And things that aren't attached to a root component can't have a local transform. They only can scale up and down. Because local transform requires it to have a parent component, which neither of these technically do at this point. So now that we have that set up, you can see that the hierarchy here has changed, and the spring arm component will now be able to be rotated around like we wanted it to. So let's see. The rotation here probably doesn't really matter. We just set this to world rotation because we don't want it to rotate as the character itself rotates. So let's put this down into the world, and this is going to be a little weird. But we set this to auto-possess player 0, and then I'm going to just set this one to not auto-possess for a moment, because this is my test player usually, but of course we're going to be test playing this dude. And this is... okay, something's not entirely correct here, and I feel like it's got to do with the fact that this camera is up his ass. So maybe what we need to do is we need to also move this dude up a little bit. There we go, yeah. Okay, so I only really care about this spring arm component for one reason, by the way, not even for its collision setting. So we can even, if we wanted to, just set collision test to being false. What I want to do is I want to enable the camera lag a little bit so that it's just a little bit smoother moving around. But that should be, yeah, pretty much like the view that I'm looking for. Maybe it can be nice to angle this ever so slightly. But at this point, the way that we would probably want to do that is like actually just straight up not using rotation, to be honest with you. So let's set this back to relative rotation real quick. Because using rotation on these things I just remembered is not great. The way that you want to do that is using this offset for this exact reason. Because it says rotation is 0 now, but it clearly isn't. Actually, rotating this thing around doesn't do anything at this point. So what we'll do is we'll just reset this and hope that rebuilding fixes that as well. And it seems like it kind of does, but there is a little bit of rotation to the camera still, which is a bit weird. So let's figure that out. Oh, I think that might just be on this instance. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. So there's a couple of things to note here. First and foremost, I just realized that this thing doesn't have a collision box. So we're definitely going to need to add that in the future. But we can offset this thing with these values. So it's using the right axis, that is. And then the proper... So if we set this to like 500, it'll be up a little higher. And then because this target arm is... probably need to be more than 500, to be honest with you, like 800. And then this target arm is 500 units long, so we also set this to 500, and then this is now entirely like looking down. And we can even maybe like make it look at a slight angle. And then the camera component itself we can rotate, right? So we can kind of like do this with it. Maybe even give it a slight angle as well. So now you can see that we have this view, which is just a little bit better. All right, let's give him input actions, because they're all pretty much the same aside from one of them. Because moving and looking around, we already have for our main character. So we have input action move. Just gotta make sure that's the right one, because apparently I have two of those. This one triggers when paused, so that doesn't seem right. This one doesn't trigger when paused, so that's good. Look, also gonna check. That's pretty much good. And then for this, I'm just gonna use attack for now. We'll make a special one for this, I think, because this one is going to need to have a custom trigger, most likely, I think. Okay, so our looking around doesn't quite work. Oh, but that is because I haven't set this thing to use world rotation yet. So yeah, it's not quite great with the mouse, of course, because I haven't set this up to work with a mouse. So you can see with a controller, this works a lot better. It is about 90 degrees offset, which is weird. Must be something in this code. Did I swap these two around? Oh, Copilot just missed a bit of code. I just asked ChatGPT, because why the hell wouldn't I? Copilot just missed this bit of code, which ChatGPT also put in parentheses, but I don't think that's necessary. Yeah, because this is division and multiplication, so that's actually like not necessary. I didn't even know that like just writing pi like that worked. Nice macro. But that should fix the offset. Okay, but now why doesn't the movement input work? Is it just because of the scale value being just 1? So just moving very slowly. Let's set this to like 1,000. I thought the acceleration on the input component would deal with that. Or the movement component, rather. Oh, I didn't save these as well. Sure. Move. Oh, the issue might just be that this one is not bound. I just thought about that. We'll see in a moment. Well, this certainly has made things worse. So ChatGPT is just like fucking with me, apparently. And why is it 90 degrees offset? Oh, that's the thing. Is I'm using degrees to radians here. That's what this is supposed to like do. The thing that I just removed there, the divide by 180 multiplied by pi. That's what degrees to radians does, effectively, right? Yeah, there you go. This just multiplies by that value. So that's why I was messing up. And then degrees to radius, I guess that 90 degree is just like the offset. So if we just do degrees per radians, if we remove this, first and foremost, plus 90, that should maybe fix it. Also, this add input movement is not working, but I looked it up, and we can do floating movement component, or whatever we call it, like movement, add input vector, and this needs to probably get an include. So yeah, we add input vector instead of adding movement input, because this one immediately puts that into the components. Add movement vector just makes the actor itself handle it, I think. So this should fix that up as well. And then this is either plus or minus 90. I honestly don't know. But that's an easy fix either way, right? Did I save all my assets before closing? I don't know. We'll see. So this is going to have made the looking direction issue better or worse. It's better because it just fits now. So yeah, I needed to add 90 degrees to that. I'm still not entirely sure why. Not going to lie. But I did. And then the movement still doesn't work. But that might just be because it's not mapped. Because we have multiple like move input actions. So I'm just going to try one of them surely has been mapped. Maybe it's a good idea to put the input action for move. Oh yeah, now that does not help at all, does it? Why do I have 3 of these? I really should get that fixed up. I think the best way to go about doing that is actually... Oh, because there's a bunch of... Oh, yeah, I imported a bunch of stuff from like other projects, which all come with a third-person character blueprint of their own. Yeah, definitely that's the reason that I have multiple move inputs. That is annoying as hell. This is the one that I work with. Can I just like put that? You can. Okay, learn something every day. Want to print string? Just want to see whether or not it's got triggered at all. Yes, it does. It is. Ooh, it's inverted. it works technically. It's really wow. How did that invert? How did that happen? Is that to do with the input mapping that I set up for? Surely not, right? Surely not. Modifiers, dead zone, scalar, 5051. Huh. And here, do I have any like weird modifiers? No. No, that just means that I have this. Is it dependent on the act of rotation? So if I just like rotate, no, it's just it is world oriented. So at least that's good, because otherwise the code would be a huge pain in the ass. So why does this do what it do? I guess, I mean, it's literally as easy as just doing this, and that fixes it. Because if both axes are inverted, just inverting them back again should line them up. Okay, so the x-axis is now the right way around, but the y-axis is not. So apparently I only needed to invert one of them. Sure, that works. I'm just gonna like live code patch this in. There's no reason to rebuild the entire like thing every single time I make a little change. Sometimes you need to do it twice, first time for it to like catch, and then okay. So no, it still is inverted. Why is it still inverted? This doesn't make sense. Why is it inverted? You know, that actually doesn't make sense. Yeah, because I didn't properly patch it in. Yeah, sometimes it just does that. I don't know why. You've seen it yourself, right? I did it 3 times. There we go. Okay, so we effectively now have our twin stick character controller, and then we can just add in like a shooting mechanic, probably on like the shoulder buttons or something like that. So for this, let's go into the blueprint on begin play, I guess. We get player controller, get local player input subsystem. That's common input, that's the wrong thing. This one, and bind. We add a new mapping context for this dude. And I guess we have to make a new one. So that's not the right one. This is the right one. Twin stick mappings. I guess we can, literally, if we wanted to, just keep the mappings from the player active, because again, looking and moving are essentially the same, but it would be nice to have separate, at least mappings for those, because these mappings kind of have hard-coded in them how fast these things move, don't they? Looking, it literally does not matter. Or it negates the Y. That might be why it was 98 degrees offset for some reason. Yeah, that seems like that probably was the reason. Okay, we figured that out. But yeah, especially this movement with this, where it has, like, this dead zone is fine, but this fact that the scalar like 50-50 and then 1, I don't know, it kind of seems like maybe like remapping that might be not a bad idea. Then again, it's mostly a matter of just setting this to be like just 1,000, right? And then it should be slower, and at max speed should be like 500, and that should just make it slower. Yeah, that just makes that far very slow. So we don't really need to update that. 1,200 still a little like quick, but let's set it to 1,000, and then sure, for now that's good. So that means that the twin stick mappings are only going to, well, not need any of these, are only really going to need one thing, and that is the firing button. So let's just copy the input action for attack and call this twin stick fire. And this is going to have a trigger on it, and it's going to be a pulse trigger where the interval, I want this to be adjustable is the thing though. The thing that we can do, can we get it as like an object and then set trigger? I think we may be able to. Ooh, that would be nice. Can we like get triggers actually? Yeah, we can get triggers instead. I guess it's always trigger 0, and we can just Can we cast this to a specific type of trigger? Is this just an object ref? I guess we cast this to pulse. This is the first time I'm trying to do this dynamically, so bear with me here for a moment. But this should allow me to do that. So we just set this to a variable, pulse trigger, and then we make a couple of debug keys for like F, and this is then called interval. Yeah, so we can set this interval to, let's set this interval to like 0.2 when we press the F key, and then to 2 whole seconds when we press the Q key. Twin stick fire, we just kind of, either shoulder button works for now, I guess. So both of them triggering it. And I guess we just do this with a print string right now because I don't really have like any bullets set up or anything. So we just, that does not seem to be working. Why not? Probably because of the priority. Let's set this to priority like 99. So that always takes priority over everything else. Still does not seem to be doing the thing. Why is it not doing the thing? Just for shits and giggles, I'm going to put it in the default mappings here. We don't really necessarily want that, obviously. You want to be able to like enable and disable this separately. But for testing purposes, let's see if it's... Even that isn't working. Well, that definitely is working with these. So something is messing this up. Is this cast failing to begin with, by the way? Yes, it is. Okay, that's fair. Because this is the wrong input action. I never updated that. What do you know? So now it doesn't fail that cast, but it still ain't doing that much. But surely that means that this now does print out the right thing, right? Input trigger pulse 0. So that seems to work. It's removed from this mapping again, because that's clearly not doing much. Why does this not do what it should do? Is any of this... I think we have like the weapon cycling on the shoulder buttons here. Do these consume inputs? They do, but that's not the issue either. And what is the issue? Let's for now take away this trigger, just to see if that trigger is somehow the cause of everything. It does make that cast fail, it's just not doing the thing. Why is it not doing the thing? I feel like it has to be because of this. Higher priority mappings will be applied first, and if they consume input, block lower. So 99 should always like go ahead now, right? Let's put them on entirely like different buttons. It's just not triggering the action. I don't know why. Does it do start? Doesn't even do start. So it's just not getting anything. It's not doing anything. Oh, hold on. These are the kind of things that I just constantly forget. There's one more thing that I think we need to do. Going back to my character here. On possessed by, what we do is we do subsystem add mapping context, default mapping context 0. No, but actually I don't need this anymore to begin with, I don't think. Because I'm also doing this from Blueprint at this point. Which, I mean, I guess that means that removing this as an entire like thing is fine. But that's not really what we're doing right now. I'm going to try again to do it through the default input action mapping. So I know do in fact work. And I'm going to try it with the X and Z buttons here as well. So just to confirm, even though I did comment that out, actually I didn't compile, so it doesn't make a difference. Okay, so now that actually does work. So the issue is with the mapping context. But we can see that X and Z do trigger the hellos, and then if I press the F key, it changes jack shit. So that doesn't work. But we're getting somewhere, slowly but surely. Let's print out every tick what the interval is as well. So it does actually update that interval. It does it every like 2 seconds, seems about right. That doesn't seem about right at all. So I'm guessing that updating these things dynamically is not as easy as I thought it might be. So it seems like you can request rebuild mappings using context. So I guess after you update this, you need to rebuild that. So let's try to see... Well, hold on, this is just trying to apply the default mapping context. What the hell is going on in my life? Oh no. So I guess if I just make this the twin stick one, everything will work, right? I can like remove it from here. I can add it back in here. I don't even know why I removed it, to be honest with you. Okay, so before we do anything else, I think that just straight up works anyway. Oh, that's kind of upsetting. Unless this is the reason that it worked. Hold on. If I disconnect that, that seems about right. And then the Q key. Oh no, that is just okay. We want to force that immediately. Does that fix it? Is it just that easy? About every 2 seconds. I think it was the Q key, it sets it to 2 seconds, and then the F key sets it to, yeah. It still doesn't quite do it, does it? So maybe setting this dynamically is not exactly trivial. Although I guess after this rebuild, this might not be the same object anymore. So what I may need to do instead is not use this as a variable, but just every time I press this, do the cast. Because the fact that it's updating that one object is fine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the object that's at this point being used to like use the interval with, right? And it's also updating the mapping context. So can I like get mapping context or something like that? So maybe that changes something. It's set to 0.0 now, so that's surely not good. Yeah, so neither of those like literally do anything at this point. Oh, it's just printing the wrong thing. It's just printing the wrong thing because we need to get it from here. So let's hook that all up. Okay. That gives me a little bit more insight. So that's 2 seconds, 0.2, 2, takes a while. It still takes a while. So the default should be like 5 just for testing purposes, right? So that's 5, change to 2, change to 0.2. So it still uses the 5-second one, is what I'm learning here. So what I'm kind of thinking is that we're maybe overcomplicating this at this point. I'm sure that this must be possible in some way or another. But for the life of me, I can't imagine what that would be. So what we're just going to do instead is, especially since we're going to move this into C++ anyway in a moment, right? We're just going to do this a little differently. Because we just add this as mapping context, that's fine. Then we're going to go back into C++ here for the twin stick pawn. And there we're going to add a U property, blueprint, read, write, just in case. Float. Well, health will be important in a moment. Next time to fire. That's called fire allowed at time. So what we'll do is we'll also make our. We actually made our fire on the wrong fire bullet. Should I think? But it's an input action. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll make a void shoot bullet. It's really bad. I'm gonna put that on the twin stick pawn itself actually. I'll do that and protect it. And when we shoot bullet, we'll do some stuff. Float fire rate. Will have to be a U property, pattern defaults only, blueprint read write. And then for shoot bullet, we first and foremost check if time allowed to fire, or what do we call it again? Fire allowed at time is less than get rule get game time in seconds, and then everything else we'll look into in a moment. Then we'll set the fire allowed time to our current game time plus our fire rate, so that also makes sense. And then everything else, the spawning of the bullet, will leave to it for now, because I don't really have bullets yet. I guess I can make a bullet real quick. Yeah, let's make a new directory here, twin stick, so that we can add some classes in here. Because we're going to need a twin stick bullet. I'm effectively making an entire like game within this game, right, at this point. It can be a normal actor, that's fine. And for now, we'll just give this a U property, a sphere, and that's actually exactly what I wanted. So let's do another U property. Let's see if Copilot can keep the guessbook up. Edit defaults only, blueprint read only. Collider, no! It'll be a U sphere. A sphere component is actually a collider, isn't it? Yeah, so what I want, yeah, so it actually did that properly. What I wanted is a static mesh as well, which we might change into just a Niagara system at some point, but for now we'll just do U static mesh. So it was actually kind of ahead of me. The mesh will be a mesh, and then root object will be the mesh, and then the sphere will be the sphere, and that will be attached to the mesh. And we need an include for that. That's kind of everything we need for now, I think. I mean, we can add some overlap stuff, but I think I'm just going to do that through a blueprint because it makes a little bit more sense to do a blueprint, to be honest with you. And also, this is going to, well, this is going to need to be an object pool object, right? Because we're going to be spawning in an absolute metric fuck ton of these things. We'll do that some other time, I think. So for now, we'll just spawn these in as is. That's fine. Let's go back to the twin stick pawn. New property, edit, defaults only. Do we need this to be blueprint writable? I guess it can be nice. Yeah, so it's the bullet class. If we have a bunch of different bullets, I guess it can be nice to have like an upgrade that you can pick up that changes your bullet type. So that would make it like writable on runtime through Blueprint, because that's likely something that I would do through Blueprint. Because again, collision stuff is just easier to do through Blueprint because you don't have to go like binding functions and stuff. It's just an event that you can use. So yeah, twin stick bullet. When we twin stick, where's the twin stick pawn? This one. We just spawn bullet. Spawn location will be, well, exactly that actually, yes. It will be our actual location plus our forward vector times 100 or times something. So that's exactly right. Spawn rotation will be our current rotation as well. That makes sense to me. And then we spawn that bullet. You see, this is one of those things. I just want to go on a little AI around, right? I could have written this myself. I would have written this myself. But the fact that it just understands what I'm trying to do and just writes all that for me with all the variables that I already have created makes it so much faster and so much smoother, and lets me actually like think about how to design and architect my code rather than tediously writing it out. So I like this. That said, the bullet definitely also needs a projectile component. I just realized. So let's add that as well. Edit defaults only. Blueprint rewrite, why not? Class projectile movement components. So let's add that in here as well. Which I guess we're going to actually, yeah. So this is the thing, right? We need to spawn these deferred because unlike in Blueprint, where you can like expose something on spawn, like I can make a variable here, expose on spawn, and then when I spawn one of these things in, spawn, well, I need to compile first. And it needs to be instance editable. Spawn active from class, and what class is even are we on? Twin stick like player. It has this as like an input. C++ doesn't really work easily like that. What you need to do is you need to like spawn in the actor, deferred, meaning that it doesn't actually exist in the world yet and it doesn't like run as begin play and all that kind of stuff. Then you need to write some code to update its values on its like default settings or whatever you want. Things like its direction and speed for its movement component, because that's going to be driven by the character itself. And then you finish spawning, so it can run as begin play on everything with the updated values that you gave it. That is if we want the like fire speed to also be driven by the character. If we just want that to be driven by the bullets themselves, that's actually not a problem because we can just like set their default speed and that'll probably be good. And that actually kind of sounds like it's nice to do. Because I have to remember, I'm not actually making a full game in which I'm going to have like 100 different upgrades for like fire rate and fire speed and whatever. So if I just have a couple of different types of bullets that have different speeds and like different damage, and all that is stored within the bullet itself, I don't need to deal with like spawning things in the food and stuff. So I think that's probably the way that we're going to go about doing this, to be honest with you. That said though, I definitely do want the bullet to have a damage value. So let's make new property again. I don't know why it doesn't. There we go. Thank you very much. Flow for damage, yeah. Now, the question becomes, this project implements the gameplay ability system. That's not a question, that's a statement, I know. Do we want to use gameplay ability for this? Do I want to set up like all the code for the gameplay ability system for what's effectively a minigame? Or am I just going to hardcode a health value on my pawns and kind of be done with it? Because I have an entire like interface set up in Blueprint. So that will be a little bit annoying, but for like applying damage and stuff with custom variables and all that kind of neat stuff. But that's all meant to be used with like the action RPG gameplay. So it has like damage type and stuff like that. This is probably not going to have any of that. This is probably just, hey, I'm overlapping with something. Are you also a pawn? Yes. Then your HP is now going down by a certain amount. I think it's just going to be as simple as that. So I don't think I'm going to be using gameplay ability for this, because setting up gameplay ability is like not the most difficult thing in the world ever, but it's also like not trivial. So I think we're just going to go with going in here and adding in a new property. Add defaults only. Well, it might actually be nice to add it anywhere for this one. Blueprint read write, float. This will be the max health. And then view property. We're only going to make this one blueprint read write, actually. We're not going to expose this to be editable because we're going to be setting, this will just be the current health. We're going to just be setting this, its default value on begin play. Syntax highlighting is a little weird. To just being the max health. So there's no reason to set this like in the viewport or like in the details panel or whatever. So we'll just go in here on begin play and we set our current health to our max health. Because whenever we spawn in any enemy, we're going to want it to be at max health. So we only have to like set up the max health. So that's pretty much like all the super relevant C++ code for now, I think. I'm pretty sure that if we just save everything in Unreal, has a couple of issues, but I'm just going to ignore that. Let's rebuild, make a couple of blueprint classes to like make all of this properly spawnable and visible. And then I think we effectively have our twin stick character. So let's give that a shot. I'm just going to put them all on the player for now. We'll make a bullet, twin stick bullet. This will be BP base bullet. I guess the base bullet is the C++ class to be fair, but just mesh a simple sphere. Make this a little smaller and make this a little like bigger. And other actually cast that to twin stick spawn. Get the current health. Set the current health. Probably shouldn't make this just a function on it actually. But for now, for testing purposes, this will probably be good enough. Minus the damage. Yeah, because the character should be handling its like own death as well. Because right now here we check current health being less than or equal to like 0. That's all kind of weird. Print string and then you would die and stuff. But again, we're going to just make this into a function in a moment. I just want to have something that is like visualizable. The initial speed, let's set that to like 500. I don't know if that's a lot. I also want this to not use any gravity. None of this is going to use gravity. It's just going to keep going until it hits a wall. At which point it just, again, it's going to destroy itself for now. It will turn itself off as part of the object pooling once we actually finish off the object pooling thing. But I want to make a like tutorial on object pooling in the near future. I don't know, by the time this goes up, maybe that video already went up or something. I don't know. So it kind of feels like double dipping to make a tutorial on it and then also make a video where I implement it. So I might not do that on video. This might just be a one-off thing to begin with. Let me know if you actually like enjoy watching me go through this way. Because it's not really like a straightforward tutorial, but it still might be fun and nice to watch me go through all this. Either way, it destroys when it overlaps with like literally anything. So in theory, that should mean that we don't have a class set up that we should be shooting. So yeah, that that adds up. Bullet class, BP bullet. Still not doing it. Still not doing it. Oh, I think that might be because I'm an idiot. And fire bullet, yeah, I never made a call shoot bullet. Just gonna live code this. I think I might need to do it one more time. No, that was it. I guess this has to go as well. The pulse thing that we set up. I'm just printing some things because it is actually like triggering this, but it's not. I'm just gonna rebuild because live coding is weird, man. Sometimes it just doesn't do anything effectively. This shoot bullet doesn't have like an override that I'm not filling in, right? Yeah, no. Oh, it might just be overlapping with, yeah, I think I know what's going on. It might just be immediately destroying itself because it's too close to the character. So let's make it print hello when it overlaps with a, no, it just doesn't spawn in, does it? Let's make it print whenever it spawns. It does spawn them. It is spawning them, but I don't know where. But certainly it is spawning them and then immediately removing them. But it's not actually... Oh, it's overlapping with something else, the issue. Oh, because... Yeah, it's spawning them from down there. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's just make this thing go up a little bit. I mean, it's not fantastic, because it still does instantly disappear, but it is technically spawning them. And my fire rate is just set to like 0. So if I set my fire rate to like 0.5, it should spawn one every 0.5 seconds. And they should not overlap with each other at that point. Yeah, so there we go. We oh, the issue isn't that my character was offset 90 degrees. The issue is that my mesh was offset 90 degrees. That's a fuck up. But yeah, as you can see, we essentially have a skeleton of a twin stick shooter set up right now. Where's my player? Because we're gonna need to get rid of this plus 90. I'll just, like, honestly, in the twin stick pawn. What does the third person character have as its root? Oh, the collider is its root, of course. Duh. So yeah, I guess we just make this a, what kind of collider are we gonna use for this? What makes sense? I guess just a box collider will be good enough. Yeah, I think it will be. I don't think this thing even needs a tick, funnily enough. Well, it will need to for animation-related reasons, I think. So this will instead be root component collision. Oh, that needs to be included. And then the mesh, we set that up to the collision components. Yeah, so that way we can just rotate the mesh around as well. And we, for collision reasons, like there's certain things, I don't remember what exactly, but like for overlapping reasons or something. I don't remember the details. Certain collision stuff only really likes to take into account root component colliders. So if you have any other colliders on your thing that aren't a root component, it doesn't take them into account. I think it's like the navigation system does that kind of stuff. It's probably not going to be like overly relevant for what we're doing, because all of this is like floating pawns anyway, so they're just going to move like a straight line from A to B, and they're not going to really use the navigation system because they straight up probably can't. Maybe they can. Yeah, they can, because the nav mesh has a certain amount of like height above it that it sees as being navigable. So floating components can just move to that linearly as if they're projected like onto the surface, I think. I'm not going to be floating that much above the surface, so it'll be fine. But yeah, now we have this collider, and that means that we can rotate this thing around properly to like this direction. And while we're at it, might as well set like the rough collider that would fit with whatever this is. I'm not going to be using this mesh to begin with, by the way, if you were wondering. I would hope that's obvious, but maybe it's not. It can be pretty rough as far as collision goes. It's probably best to even make this a little bit smaller, to be honest with you. Because it is going to be a little bullet helly, because it is a twin stick shooter at the end of the day, or it will be. Okay, so that's exactly the wrong direction. Wait, is it? Is it the right direction? It's just my input is the wrong direction now. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that can be tweaked here. Of course, like max health, we're going to set to like 100 by default, set this to 0.5 by default, actually save that stuff this time. Yeah, you guys can't see my controller, but when I press up, it looks down. And I didn't do that like a second ago, so I don't really know what's going on with any of that. So I guess we do go back in here again, into the player. And we do set this to -180. And just call that a day. I've been trying to end off this like part of the video, or this video to begin with, or this video in general, for like the past 25 minutes, I think. But stuff just keeps popping up, and if that just ain't what game development is like in a nutshell. Yeah, so now it does it the proper way around. So yeah, we got our twin stick dude. Now we just need to make the rest of the game mode around that, which is gonna be fun, question mark. I also need to make like a little drone dude and a couple of simple enemies. These are going to be fairly easy to model, I imagine, unlike most of my characters, which take like between 4 and like 7 weeks to make usually. But yeah, again, let me know if this is a format that you guys enjoy, that you think is valuable in any way, shape, or form. I might never do it again. I might make this like a usual thing. We might just make this entire like twin stick shooter entirely in this format. And then once that is done, maybe this will be the format that I just make all of the like genre switches up that I have in the game, which is going to be like 6 in total, well, actually 7 in total. So there's like plenty of content to like keep this format around if you guys enjoy it and you think it's valuable. And I think the reason that I set up this whole like genre shift within the game is for a bit of gameplay variation for the player, but also for me as a developer, so that I can kind of like scratch that itch of doing something different every so often, but still have it be productive toward like the main project. And I felt like twin stick shooter is like a fun little thing that I can do. Make it like a slight bullet hell type of game. Nothing too difficult, of course, because it's going to need to be played by people who are primarily there to play an action RPG. But it allows me to play around with this kind of stuff a little bit. But it also is like a very small, like entire game development journey packed up in a nice little package. And I had a comment a while ago on like a community post. It's like, hey, can you just go through like making a game? And I'm like, okay, that's a lot. But maybe this format kind of works for that. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you actually like straight up hate it, I will not do it again. If you like it, I probably will do it again. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. And of course, an extra massive thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas, and my Cave Student tier supporters, Oiku and Earl Monsville Urno.